Good evening, everybody. One of the major challenges that we always have with these live events is whether we're really live or not. You never really know. So we can only see each other and we can't ever know whether the technology's worked. And you'll notice that we're a bit late starting this evening because the aforementioned technology got in the way and prevented us getting started on time. So apologies if you've been waiting. My name's Mike Bell. I am the leader of North Somerset Council, and this is our North Somerset Council Question Time budget special. So the idea with this is you can pop your questions and comments in the comment section on our Facebook page or via YouTube, and we'll try and in the next hour or so get through as many questions as we can to tell you something about the budget and any other issues that you want to ask about. I'll invite my colleagues to introduce themselves. I'm joined by three members of the North Somerset Council Cabinet this evening. So I'll ask them to introduce themselves. Roger, would you like to go first?
Yep, I'm Roger Whitfield. I am Cabinet Member for Adult Social Care.
Thank you, Roger. And Catherine?
Good evening, I'm Catherine Gibbons and I'm the Cabinet Member for Children's Services, Lifelong Learning and Skills.
Thank you, Catherine. And Annemieke.
Hello, I'm Annemieke Waite and I am the Cabinet Member for Planning and Environment.
So today we start this session first and foremost thinking about the incident that's occurred in Whirl over the last 24 hours, and our thoughts are absolutely with the families and all those affected. I'm going to hand over to Catherine just to say something about the situation. Catherine?
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, obviously, as you've seen from the police reports that have been on television and on social media, there isn't a lot we can say. We have to respect the family's privacy and the work that the police are doing. But as Mike has said, my heart goes out to the family, and there's nothing one can say about such tragic circumstances. I just think that we are shocked and saddened by this, and we would restrain ourselves from making any sort of comments or speculations. And I sincerely hope that people resist that temptation in the comments, because it isn't helpful to the ongoing investigation to speculate about anything. Just think and pray, if you're that way inclined, for the family and for everyone concerned. Thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. So we've billed tonight's question time as a budget special because it's the time of year when North Somerset Council, like many other councils around the country, has to start thinking about its budget for next year. We plan our budgets on a financial year basis, so April through to the end of March. So we're looking at the budget for 2026-27 and the years following it. Just to set the scene a little bit before we move into some questions, the financial position of all local authorities has been increasingly difficult over the last couple of decades, essentially driven by three big factors. The first one is the cost of providing all services. Just like our household budgets, unfortunately, the cost of things has gone up and up over the years. And unfortunately, just like our own households, the ability of the council to generate income has not matched the increase in prices. So the cost of providing services has gone up. Secondly, there has been a real increase in demand for social care services. So that's from, pretty much from birth right the way through until people are in their old age. There are more people who are living longer with more complex needs, whether that's disabilities, whether that's mental health, whether that's other special needs that need to be met, and that includes in schools and in education settings as adults, and then also in terms of long-term residential and nursing care. So obviously more people needing that care means that more money needs to be spent on those services. And then the third big factor that has affected all local council budgets is that over that time, we've gone through a period of austerity in terms of government support for local councils. So particularly since the economic crash a decade or more ago, the amount of government grant that is given to local councils has been reduced in real terms. So in North Somerset's case, our external funding has been reduced by about 25% in terms of government support. So you can see that we're caught in this really challenging situation where the cost of providing services is going up, demand for those services is going up, and the amount of money available to provide and pay for those services is not going up at the same pace. And the end result of that is that last year, this year, and next year, we've got really significant financial pressures. And the bottom line is, being completely honest with you, we're spending more money than we've got coming in. Now, we've been able to make do and mend by delivering more savings and efficiencies, by using some of the council's reserves that we had, the rainy day fund that we can use to support everyday spending. But that's not a sustainable position in the long run. And so we now need to take action. And that includes a dynamic change programme, a transformation programme to deliver services differently, to reduce the scope of the services that we offer, but also to deliver savings, which includes stopping some services or reducing services in the short and long term. But we also do have to look at council tax rises. So at the moment, council tax for a council like North Somerset is capped at 2.99% for general council tax and 2% for social care precept. So that means we can't increase it by more than 4.99% in future years. What we have now had to do is ask the government to look at that again and give us additional flexibilities to potentially increase council tax above that 4.99% cap. As part of that process, the government will evaluate our budget and our finances. They will decide whether we've got a sustainable plan, and they will determine whether that we can have the additional flexibility to increase council tax by a higher amount. We don't want to be doing that. We don't want to be in a position where we have to, but the facts are that we can't deliver enough savings. We haven't got the reserves left that in order for us to deliver a balanced budget for next year. So we've got to use all the tools that are available to us, and that includes asking local people to pay more. I'm going to move on to some questions now, as usual, there'll be lots of questions that will cover a variety of things. We'll try and cover as many as we can as we work through the session. The first question, and this was one that we had in advance, was about eliminating waste. And the example that the resident used was, why can't you eliminate waste on things like the red recycling bags? And the resident pointed out the bags seem to be falling apart anyway. What a waste of money. So I'm going to hand over to Annemieke, who's the councillor responsible for our waste service, to just tell us a little bit about how we got the red bags and what we're doing about the problems with them.
Thank you, Mike. So when we started planning for our 3 weekly black bin collections, we knew that one of the things we would have to do is to separate our recycling in a more efficient way than we were doing. So we decided that going with bags would be the way forward, but rather than rushing into that without checking things out properly, we ran a trial on the red bags. So we ordered a number of bags. I think there were several thousands of them. And we distributed those to a number of different areas in North Somerset and asked the residents to try them out for a lengthy period of time and see how they got on with them. The results of those were very positive. The bags were very popular. The only thing that people felt was that the bags were a little bit too big and they would prefer them smaller. So after that trial period was over, we then negotiated with the company and we ordered the bags for the whole of North Somerset so that every resident would get a red bag. So they were smaller, and in every other way they were exactly the same. So when the bags were delivered and we started using them, it was very clear very quickly that not all of the bags were of a good enough quality. They started fading very, very quickly, and not just fading very quickly, but also deteriorating very fast. And so we complained about it to the company, and I will spare you the long story, which was lots of toing and froing between us and the company. It became very apparent to us that we were absolutely right, and that the quality of the new bags was not the same as the quality of the trial bags that we had tested. So we sent back some bags, they tested them in the factory, and eventually came back to us and said, yes, they could see that there were issues with it. We've then had a very lengthy negotiation period with them. We've actually taken samples of all the bags across North Somerset. When the waste teams have been out, they've been checking how many bags were what we consider irreparably damaged. And I'm pleased to say that we have now got a very good agreement with the company, and that they are refunding us all the bags. And so it's a very good outcome for us, which means they have completely accepted that they were at fault, and all the bags will be repaid to us. And at the same time, if anybody's bag is deteriorated, sorry, I have a frog in my throat. If the bags are deteriorated so badly that they're no longer usable, residents can contact us and we will replace that bag as soon as we possibly can. We're very pleased with the outcome of the negotiations. There was a time where they weren't quite so keen to meet us exactly the whole way, but our negotiating team has been working extremely hard to make sure that we get the best possible deal for North Somerset, and that this was not going to be something that was going to cost us any money at all. So we're very pleased with that outcome, and I hope that residents are pleased with that too. And we know that the people who actually had the original bags are still very pleased with them, and those bags have never deteriorated, have never faded. So we absolutely know that this was something that was completely beyond our control, and it was just down to the quality of the bags that were delivered in the second batch.
Okay, thanks, Annemieke. The next question is from Nigel Martin, who is saying that children and adult services costs are clearly out of control. It needs a different approach. Is it volume or price that's causing the problem? Is there a better way to manage it? So I'm going to come to both Roger and Catherine on this one. So Roger, do you want to kick off from an adult services point of view?
Yep, certainly. Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Nigel. And to a certain extent, Nigel, you're right there. And children's and adult services costs do look as if they're clearly out of control. But what we have is a certain issue with the way that these services are delivered. So we have a statutory duty to deliver adult social care, as outlined in the Care Act of 2014. And we have no way of getting around that. We just have to deliver those services almost regardless of what they cost. So we procure the services that we can at the best values we can. We deliver in-house where possible. And we work with a lot of different providers to try and keep those costs under control. But the reality is that the costs are increasing. There's inflation, there's the rise in the minimum wage, there's the rise in stamp duty. All of these affect the pricing, the rise in rents as well. Everything affects the pricing of the services that we pay for. And yes, we are squeezing every service across the council to try and maintain the things that the law says that we have to maintain. And the only real answer to this is it would be useful if there was more funding coming from central government, because it doesn't seem right that the burden here falls upon the taxpayers in North Somerset to look after the people who are unfortunate enough to be injured or live with some form of disability. But the fact is that the government are actually throwing less into the pot and not more. And that means that you are being asked to support more and more of the burden of doing this. And unless the government actually change the way that things are done, I think this is going to continue in the long run. Now, the government are looking into this, but they're not due to report back until 2028. So they're looking into it, but it's going to take a long time to get anything sorted. And in the meantime, here we are staring down the barrel of a gun with a massive budget deficit. Catherine, would you like to speak about children's?
And also, Catherine, if you could also, and I'm sure you will anyway, if you could address one of the other questions we've had, and I'm sorry I can't find the name now, which was how we're getting on with the residential, bringing some of the residential homes for children.
I haven't checked the comments. We were warned not to distract ourselves by looking at the comments, but I'll trawl through and find that. Yes, it is true that we spend more and more on children and adults, as Roger has said, because this is a statutory obligation. In terms of, offering the right services to children, it's also a moral obligation, because if we don't treat our children the right way, you are just going to build up problems in adulthood, and that exacerbates the problems that Roger and his colleagues face. So early intervention with children is the ideal solution. And it's true, we have increasing pressures in the number of children to come into care. And I think the other question was probably about residential placements. And we're very, very aware of how difficult that is and how dependent we have been on a market which is somewhat broken, as people often say, where we're at the mercy of providers that are often owned by external organizations and even hedge funds. So making profit out of vulnerable children is something that I find really distasteful, let's say, which is why we took the decision this year to try and disrupt that market as far as we are able, and have plans for, well, fast advancing plans for 2 residential homes in North Somerset. One is a sort of educare home, one offering therapeutic placements. And this will be a real game changer for us, because we'll be keeping these children in North Somerset, close to where their families are, close to where they live and all their connections, and having the control and offering the right sort of care that they need, which is the main thing. And that will naturally cost less, but it will be better. The other thing that we're doing is that we have been engaged in a transformation program within children's services for some time now, prior to the overall change program that the council is initiating, because you cannot go on doing things in exactly the same way and expecting a different result. It's what the old adage says, isn't it? That way lies madness. So we are aware that we do have to do things differently. We've been working towards bringing our family or our children's centres into a family hub structure for quite some years, in fact, since the previous administration, and that's well advanced. And we believe that we'll be offering a more flexible, better service for families. And it won't be for children from 0 to 5. It will be from children from 0 to 19 or 0 to 25 in the case of SEND. So we are really hopeful that we will be reaching families at the right time and offering support throughout the child's life in a much more flexible way. There's so much that we're doing that I could go on for half an hour, but I won't. I will just highlight the fact.
Definitely don't.
No, I won't. But in the area of SEND, special educational needs and disabilities, we are anxiously awaiting the white paper in the new year, but we're hopeful that that will address some of the huge challenges there. I just hope it's not going to be something that is so difficult for us to implement at speed, because I know, talking to parents, that uncertainty is the worst possible thing if you have a child that has additional needs. So one of the things we have done successfully is to use AI, in fact, to collate the information when we create education healthcare plans. And this means that we now are one of the best performing councils in the country in terms of getting these out within the time allocated. We're up to about 95%. So compared to some of our neighbouring authorities, we are doing well in that area. Sometimes it's about making small but significant changes and sort of holding the line. In the final aim is to make sure that what we deliver is the right thing for children and the right thing for families. And I know from my colleagues in the Cabinet that I'm not always the one who is advocating cutting money. I'm often fighting for extra money. So I welcome your support, colleagues.
Thanks, Catherine. And just to underline the scale of the challenge for everyone, in terms of our social care for adults and children, that's approaching 2/3 of all the money we spend. So as a council, the proportion of money that's been absorbed by social care has gone up and up over the last couple of decades. And the real challenge we've got is that, as colleagues have said, we've got a legal obligation to provide those services. We have to comply with national rules and legislation that are set by Parliament, but we don't get funded for it by the government. So there is a real issue that we're not in control of a huge chunk of our spending, and we have limited levers. So that's not to say, as Roger and Catherine have said, that there aren't things that we can do to try and drive costs down locally, but ultimately our room for manoeuvre is really limited. So we do need the government to tackle this long-term social care challenge for children and adults, and as Catherine was saying, reform SEND services. Okay, I'm going to take the next question. So apologies, we're miles behind now. Annie Henners asks, how much money has North Somerset Council received from Disney Plus at Castlewood? So for those that don't avidly follow what goes on at Castlewood, which is our building in Clevedon, which we're currently in the process of demobilising for sale. So we're going to close that office and sell it off. Just by way of background, by the way, a previous administration decided to buy that building. It was a bad investment. It's cost us a lot of money that hasn't paid its way, and we're pleased to be disposing of it. But one of the things we are able to do whilst we're exiting from the building is we've got a film unit that operates in North Somerset that attracts TV and film companies to North Somerset, and they pay us to use some of our facilities. So years ago, we had an episode of Only Fools and Horses filmed at the town hall. And at the moment, we've got Disney Plus doing some filming at Castlewood. That does generate income, which we can use to support local services. I am afraid, Annie, I can't give you a direct answer about how much they're paying us to use Castlewood, and partly because I don't know, and partly because we have to sign confidentiality agreements until the programmes are actually aired. But we'd be happy to share information about the overall success of the film unit anytime. So thank you for the question. Next one from Alan Rice. He says, Hastings Council spends almost 50% of its core spending power on temporary housing. We in North Somerset spend about 8%. Will that grow significantly, and is there more that we could do to support housing provision? So Hastings Council is a district council, so a lower tier council. It doesn't have social care responsibilities, so is in a slightly different position to North Somerset. That's why our spend on temporary housing is lower. We do anticipate that that's going to grow. We know that there's growing demand for housing support because of the overall economic situation. And just to give you a straight answer, yes, we would absolutely be open to looking at other ways that we can support temporary housing. We are in conversations with partners about how we could do that. And I'm certainly happy to ask our representative to the Avon Pension Fund to take that away to the pension fund and see whether there is something that we could do regionally to support that kind of investment. Okay, I'm going to come next to Michelle Yalf, who's asking, what is North Somerset Council's stance on building new homes on Greenbelt land around Western Bigwood and in Northwestern, and is making a plea to protect the Greenbelt as much as possible. Annamika, as our planning lead, would you like to speak to that one?
Absolutely. I Well, first of all, I think most people who have followed this debate for the last few years will be aware that as a council, we have consistently said that we did not want to use our greenbelt areas for housing at all. In fact, so much so that even this time last year, in June last year, when we were talking about our then draft local plan, we still maintained that we were going to protect our greenbelt because as a council, we felt that that was the right thing to do. And so consistently we have done that all the way through. However, we had an election last year in July, and the new government very quickly came up with new plans for what they wanted councils to do in terms of housing building. And they came out with a new calculation for how many homes every council needed to build. As well as doing that, they also came up with new legislation for where we build houses, and they absolutely made it clear that if you had no other areas where as a council you can build homes, then you have to use your greenbelt areas. So that put us in a very difficult position, first of all, because instead of building roughly 15,000 homes over the next 15 years, they increased our numbers to just over 24,000. So there was an increase of nearly 9,000 homes that we had to build. Now, anybody that knows North Somerset well, and I'm sure that our listeners here do as well, you know that North Somerset has a large proportion of land that lies below sea level and is therefore at risk of flooding. We also have a proportion of it to the south, which is part of the Mendips National Landscape, which means it's absolutely out of bounds. We can't do anything in that area in terms of creating new homes. That actually leaves just greenbelt. And, you know, there are very few areas in North Somerset that we can classify as anything other than greenbelt. So I'm afraid the government forced our hand and have made us look at those areas that they consider sustainable for creating new developments. And when you look at the areas in North Somerset where we have now potentially proposed in our draft local plan to build these new communities, they are apart from the ones that we already had planned around the western area and Wolfers Hill, we have now had to include 3 other strategic sites. One of them is just to the south of Bristol in what we locally now call Woodspring, which is along the A38 where the old Woodspring golf course is. Another area of development lies between Backwell and Nailsea, and a third, what we call a strategic site, is around Pill. Now, all of those are in the Greenbelt, and all of those are areas that, had we been given any option, we would absolutely not have built. But because we have no choice, those are the areas that are considered the most sustainable because of their location. If you imagine the area around the A38 to the south of Bristol, it's very quick to realise that with a little bit of movement, you can get a metro bus to come into those new communities. And because it's quite flat and it's literally within a mile from Bristol, you can have cycle paths, and there are alternative ways for people to travel to and from those sites without being necessarily very car dependent. Similarly, the government have come out with some new part of the legislation that says if there is an area that is close to a train station, those areas are to be prioritised for development. And Backwell and Nailsea are both within easy access to a train station. And with the development of the new Portishead to Bristol railway, Pill is also going to be an active train station. So in every way possible, the government is forcing us to look at those areas for development because those are the ones that they want us to develop. Now, I still feel that in an ideal world, I and most people that I speak to would rather not build on Greenbelt. But given that we have no option, the best possible next scenario to that is to make sure that when we build on those areas, we do it as sustainably as possible and that we build homes that people actually need. So an area like the A38 in Greenbelt is going to have is going to look at 50% affordable homes. That's again a government legislation. So we're hoping to build more affordable homes, but we're also hoping to build homes that people genuinely need. We don't need every home to be 3 or 4 bedrooms with a double garage and a garden front and back. There are lots of people who actually don't want that, who want to have a smaller home or a starter home. We have older people who would like to move into a property that is suitable for the elderly to live in, so all on one floor. We have some people who just don't want a garden. They want to have a lock-up home, and they might be quite happy with a beautiful apartment where they can just turn the key and go away on holiday. So we've done what they call a housing needs assessment, which looks at the needs of our residents in North Somerset, and that includes age and numbers of bedrooms that they need. It also includes things like access and access to people who have additional needs. It looks at starter homes, at all of that. And the housing needs assessment is what has now driven the plans that we have put in our draft local plan, the numbers of homes, the types of homes. And then on top of that, we're going to work extremely hard to make sure that those homes are going to be sustainable, where possible net zero, and that they all have sustainable transport options as part of those developments. So while we would still prefer to not build on the greenbelt, this is the next best scenario and is going to provide homes that, frankly, people in North Somerset need and that they want. So I know that that's not going to be reassuring to people who still feel that that greenbelt shouldn't be developed, but we haven't really got any choice in this matter. And I feel that what we're doing now is absolutely the very best that we can for those areas. I hope that answers the question.
Thanks, Annamika. Okay, I've got a question from YouTube, which is, what I want to know is, how am I expected to pay above inflation council tax rises when everyone else seeks above inflation rises, including water, electric, gas, food, and so on, but pay rises are far less? I mean, being honest, I feel your pain. We're all in the same boat here. And I do understand the point that you're making. It is unfair. It is unfair that residents, taxpayers, whether that's council taxpayers or payers of national taxation, are being asked to pay more. The problem is that there is not enough money to pay for the services that we're legally required to provide. And we don't have any way of generating income other than our fees and charges and our council tax. For next year, the government is going to actually cut still further the amount of grant and support that we get as an area. So they're going to take about £24 million extra away from North Somerset over 3 years in government grant. That has consequences. Now, we'll try and deal with some of that by being more efficient and by cutting services and stopping doing things. But there are limits to how far we can go with that when we've got so many things that we are legally required to provide. I'm not sitting here, none of my colleagues are sitting here and saying we get every single decision right. Of course we don't. But we're genuinely in a situation in terms of our financial position where the cost of providing what we are required to provide is greater than our ability to generate income. The only thing we can do is either go bankrupt, in which case the government will send in outside commissioners who will do exactly the same thing. They will put your council tax up, probably higher, and they will cut services more deeply. Or we can try and rise to the challenge and make our case to you and try and get the books balanced so that we can protect local services as best we can. But the reality is, and I'm being completely honest about this, we will be asking you to pay more and you'll be getting less services. Kath Williams asked exactly that question. Why is this happening? Why are we paying more and getting less? And it is because of that pressure of demand and costs, particularly on social care and special educational needs and disabilities, where the costs and demands are going so high that everything else is paying the price. So you will feel and see poorer services, but higher costs. It is the reality of it. And unless someone changes the system at a national level and fixes it, this is going to go on indefinitely. And what we're trying to do is trying to keep the show on the road. There are no easy choices for us left, and I'm really sorry, but that is the reality of where we are. You specifically asked, Kath, as well about waste and money wasted, particularly Clevedon Seafront. There are a number of projects that happen every year throughout the life of a council. Some of them are good and work, some of them are not. Some are supported by some people and opposed by others. What I can say is that most of those big projects are supported by external funding. So in the case of Clevedon Seafront, mistakes were made, but it was externally funded. It did not affect council tax and local budgets. We tried to make the right decisions, and we tried to put it right when mistakes were made, but that does not affect the bottom line and our financial position at the moment. Okay, I'm going to move on to another question. Rob Larder says, we pay a phenomenal amount of council tax. We've had bin collections reduced to a rat-pleasing every 3 weeks, and now you want to limit access to recycling centres. So, Annemieke, do you want to say something about 3 weekly collections? And then I know we've had a couple of other questions about the booking system that's coming in to recycling centres.
Thank you. So yes, we have changed our black bin collections to 3 weekly. And while we were planning that, there was a lot of concern from residents who were very worried that they weren't going to manage work with a 3 weekly black bin collection. Interestingly, though, now that it has changed, we've had no complaints from residents about the fact that they can't get that their bins are overflowing, and we haven't had reports from our bin men either to say that bins are overflowing. But what has happened, and is actually really interesting, I think people have been so concerned that about what goes into their black bin and the fact that they now have to manage it for 3 weeks, is that they have actually started recycling more. So as a result of us introducing the 3 weekly black bin collections, we now have a 15% reduction of what is actually in the black bin. There's also a 10% increase in our recycling rates. So people are recycling more, and not just cardboard. Our food waste recycling is up by 12%. We had a huge number of people asking us for food waste, collect, the bins for your food waste. And that's gone up by 12% in that period of time. So basically, the content in the black bin is less. We have more recycling rates, and food waste is up by 12%. So those are all good things. And in addition to that, that we started collecting soft plastics, which has been unbelievably popular. And so much so that actually we have now collected 49,000 tonnes of soft plastic only since the start of this whenever it was in the summer, in July, I think it was that we started it, in mid-June, early July. So I don't know if anybody can imagine what 49,000 tonnes of soft plastic looks like, but half of that will actually fill 5 entirely Olympic swimming pools of soft plastic. So that's 10 since July. We worked out that half of that amount, if you were to lay the soft plastics, the plastic bags end to end, it would take you all the way from here to Mumbai in India. That's how much soft plastic used to go in our black bin. And now it gets collected and it gets baled, and then it gets sent to Hartlepool, where it's actually turned into effectively recycled plastic goods. So that could be a plastic bag that is a recycled plastic bag, or it could be, the traffic cones that sit on our motorways when there are roadworks going on. All sorts of things are made out of recycled plastic, and that is now where that soft plastic goes. So all in all of this has meant that we've had roughly a £1 million reduction in costs to the council. And given what Mike has just been talking about, the funding shortfall that we have, I would argue that if by introducing 3-week black bin collections, we have had all those benefits to increased recycling, and at the same time, we have also cut our costs by £1 million, that is something that's definitely worth considering. And I would imagine that most residents who think about that can consider that that is a good thing. So we're extremely pleased with the outcome of this. We're really it's genuinely a really, really good news story for us as a council. We were the first council in the country to roll out soft plastic recycling collections on a weekly basis. And I think, again, that's something that as a council, we are really, really proud of. So I know that it's not been popular in the rollout with some residents, but our experience is that people are actually genuinely very happy with the outcome. And it's done amazing things for us as a council. So I think we're very pleased with it. And I hope that residents are as well. We really are thanking all our residents who have got engaged in it and have been really keen to work with us on this. So we're hugely grateful to those people who have actually tried really hard to work with us. So thank you for that.
Can I just make a really brief comment, Anamika? I think it is great what you're saying, but as a long-time member of Plastic Free Western and Keener Coastlines, I think it's also the ultimate aim really is for us to put as much pressure on ourselves and on businesses to reduce the use of this soft plastic, you know, because we are recycling it and yet the plastic is there and it's going to end up in our oceans and probably in our bloodstreams at some stage, you know, when we consume foods that have been contaminated by it. So yeah, it's great, but let's just keep up the fight to reduce our use of such plastics as far as
absolutely
possible.
Oh, absolutely, Catherine. Ultimately, that is our overall aim, and it is by showing people just how much soft plastic we have collected in that relatively short period of time. I think most people would find quite shocking. So that is all part of the whole process. Our ultimate aim is to reduce all of it as much as we possibly can.
I think the other part of the question was about the time slots that are being introduced for the tip, wasn't it?
Absolutely, and I was going to come to that next. Yes, we are going to introduce a booking system for the household waste recycling centres. This is primarily because actually it will make things much smoother for everybody that uses the recycling centre. I know that people sometimes write to me, actually not very often, but sometimes write to me and say, well, I haven't had a problem in such and such a recycling centre. But let's not forget that when any of us go there, it is a one-off experience. But us as a council, we see when the busy times are and how busy it genuinely does get. And so in order for us to manage that process now, but also going into the future, it's really important that we do introduce these booking slots. When we have a booking slot system, it means that the staff are actually not on hand to manage the traffic and manage who comes in and when and all of that stuff. But what they will be doing is helping residents, making sure that what does get recycled and reused goes into the right areas. So actually, it's going to be a really helpful thing to residents as well to have that level of support. But I would also like to connect this to the thing we just talked about earlier, to the planning and the new homes that we are building. We have been set an enormous target by this government, the new homes that they want us to build. And we have to make sure that we do some strategic thinking about how we are going to manage all of the growth in homes, in people, in waste management as we go forward. Nobody would thank us if we ignored all of that and suddenly everything got to a gridlock because everything got to be too busy. So part of the thinking with the booking system is that it's helpful to us now, that it will make everything more manageable and easier, and it's a very, very quick and easy process to book your slot, and you can still book a slot on the same day. But actually, going forward, it means that we have a system in place that is going to cope more easily with an increase in people visiting the household recycling centres as North Somerset continues to grow and our community continues to grow. So it is actually part of our forward planning as well, and I think that is an important thing to consider.
Okay, thanks very much. I'm going to take... There was a question, I can't even find it now, which is not very helpful. There was a question about why are some prime car parks free when others are charged for? I think it was on YouTube, and reference also the disastrous Carlton Street car park. So just to say, the current council is introducing car parking charges in all of the prime locations across North Somerset. The only exception, so we have introduced car parking charges in Nailsea, and they're coming in Clevedon and parts of Portishead as well. In an ideal world, we wouldn't be doing that, but the facts are we need to generate income, and we can't justify charging in some places and not others. So those are absolutely being rolled out. In terms of the Carlton Street car park, the point here is that we're not able to open the car park fully, and it is therefore losing money. And all of this goes back to the lease that was signed in 2012 to take on the car park. I don't like blaming previous administrations because it's not really very helpful, but it was the deal that was signed by a previous council back in 2012 that is causing all the problems, and it is committing the council to taking responsibility for repairs and rent payments, which are higher than we're ever going to make from parking charges. So it's been an absolutely disgraceful decision. We're doing everything that we can to try and mitigate the impact of that, but unfortunately, us four and our colleagues are just left clearing up the mess that other people left behind. And actually, that's the answer to the question that somebody put in there, which was, why don't you all resign? I can't speak for my colleagues, but I'm not going to resign because we're in a difficult situation and there are tough choices to be made. And it's our responsibility to try and rise to the challenge and make those difficult decisions and try and improve North Somerset. And we remain committed to doing that. And walking away is absolutely not a solution. We can't just pretend that these things don't exist. Bob Cartwright asks about devolution to town and parish councils and whether this is just pushing up their precepts, which taken together with council tax rises at North Somerset is just going to add to people's problems. Roger, do you want to say something about? I think we recognise the cost pressures that the devolution programme is going to present, but there's an important principle here as well, isn't there?
I think there is. I've always felt it's really important that when it comes to decisions about things in our local areas, that those decisions are taken as close as possible to the communities that they affect. So essentially, everything, or almost everything, in Portishead has been for very many years decided by North Somerset. And as a general principle, I think that's not something that's often been seen to give value in Portishead, and the town council are keen really to make those decisions themselves and engage with the local community to allow our town to improve in the way that the community wants. And of course, they have time to do that. The downside of that, of course, is that shifts the costs across from North Somerset on the council tax onto the town council or parish council precept, which means that we are in this year looking at a large precept rise to take some of this into account. But also because of the problems at North Somerset, we are looking at a large council tax rise as well, which feels a little bit like a double whammy. But in reality, the rise coming from the town and parish councils is a very, very small fraction of your council tax bill anyway. So we're talking about, maybe the cost of a cup of coffee a week, possibly even less than that. In these areas to secure, I think the level of maintenance and that meets the aspirations of the people of the area. So I think it's a really good thing. It's something that I know I've been banging on about for a long time, that these decisions should be made lower down the chain. So I'm quite happy with that. It's just sad that it's come in the middle of a financial crisis when it could have been dealt with so much easier were we not in this position. But the ultimate outcome is, yes, the council tax will rise, the precept will rise, But I think that we'll get better decisions, better levels of maintenance, and our towns and parishes will be all the better for doing this. And I think that the on the whole, people understand that if they want something to be improved, there will be a cost to that. And hopefully this will deliver some improvements, and it will unfortunately come at a cost. But I think it's the right way forward, and hopefully Bob will be happy with that.
Thanks, Roger. I'm going to try and power through a couple more questions quickly. Kelly Jones asks, are we still doing a residence parking scheme in part of Weston? So the answer is yes. The pilot scheme in the town centre will be launching in the new year, and we'll test that out and see if it works. Stephen Morris and actually Whitey and a few others have asked, how much above the cap do you propose to raise council tax as a percentage? So at the moment, the answer is we don't know. We haven't been given our final government grant figure for next year, so we don't know. What we do know is that we are going to have to ask for flexibility to increase council tax higher. And I just want to say something about council tax that doesn't always land very well because people don't believe it. But at the moment, North Somerset Council's share of the council tax, and we're not responsible for all of the bill that you receive. So although you get your bill from North Somerset Council, only about 25% of it is actually set by other people. So that's the police authority, the fire authority, the environment agency, or your town and parish council. But the share that we are responsible for, which is for the average council taxpayer about £1,750 a year, that is the second lowest in the country, in the region, and one of the lowest in the country. The government thinks that the equivalent figure for an average council next year should be £2,060. So that's one of the reasons why our financial pressures are so acute, because genuinely, I know it doesn't feel like it when you're paying the bill and when you're looking around at the services you receive, but we are a low taxing, low spending council, and that has consequences. So when people talk about street cleaning not being good enough, or play areas, or leisure centres, or emptying of bins, one of the reasons that it's like that is that we have much less money coming in government grant and in council tax income than equivalent councils. I know that's not your problem, but it is the reality that we have to deal with. Okay, I've got a question from Peter Rogers, who says it's really difficult to get across the message about how much money goes on social care and children's services. Are there other ways that we can try and be creative to get that message across? Catherine, any views on that?
Goodness, we did a lot of work, didn't we, last year when we went round and showed the graphs about, you know, if our spending was £1, how much goes in which area, and that was quite effective. Creative ways of talking about children's social care, difficult one. I would say, however, that, you know, in terms of the reduction in spending we're making as a council, a lot of what we do in social care is protected. You know, we aren't empowered to make massive cuts in that area. That's a good point. I'll have to take that away and think about how we can creatively get this message across, possibly with more infographics and more engaging posts about where we actually spend our money. I think we've got a lot of work to do in how we communicate what we spend and what it means to people. And it's something that I quite frequently discuss with teams in children's services as to how we can get people to understand what we actually do. And I'm sure Roger has the same challenges, because a lot of this spending is something that people don't think about until they actually have to come to need it.
Thanks, Catherine. Roger, did you want to come in on that?
Yeah. I think we actually do a fantastic job in social care in North Somerset. Working in it day in, day out, of course, I see it all from the inside. And if only everybody could see what I could see, you'd realise what a great job's being done, and how wonderful it is to support all these people to live the best lives that they actually can.
Absolutely.
And this has been an issue ongoing for some time, that I just don't think as a council we shout about the good things that we do. We take it on the chin for all the bad things we do, of course, but we've been looking at ways of explaining to people exactly how this money is being spent. But you have to realise that, of course, who we're spending it on, and the exact detail of how it's being spent on people is all very personal and confidential. So we're trying to find ways to get the information out to you that makes sense, that we can share. And we've been doing some work through the projects that have been ongoing for a while now on putting together stories that have been suitably anonymised of where people have benefited and how they've benefited. And I've seen the initial output from that, and it looks very promising. And I do hope that in the very near future that we'll have something in a position to go out to people on a regular basis so that they can understand the good that this money is doing within our communities, because we always talk about the cost here and we never talk about how much good's being done, and there's an awful lot of good being done in our communities.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I agree with that. And we do have a YouTube channel for our fostering service where people share their stories, those who are willing. And it is quite moving and impressive to see what people are saying about what it means to them to be delivering that much needed care for children. And the other thing, I suppose, you're right, we don't talk about the good work that we do. We do an awful lot of good work. We rely on an awful lot of amazing people. I mean, we always want more foster carers, especially in-house ones in North Somerset. So anyone listening out there who thinks that they could do that, just get in touch, because it is incredibly rewarding. And we do support our foster carers pretty well and try and give them a package that reflects the incredibly valuable work that they do.
Okay, thank you both. Right, I'm going to try and power through again a few more questions because we're rapidly running out of time. So Ryan has asked, what about reducing the top 5 salaries at North Somerset Council, and then we wouldn't have to put council tax up? And I think he's also, or somebody did, complained about the salary that the chief executive of the council is on. So I guess there's 2 things I would say about that. So firstly, our pay scales for staff are mapped against national standards. We are a low paying council. So if you compare what our senior salaries are like at North Somerset Council, they are lower than, and I'm talking about staff here, not councillors, they are lower than the average across unitary authorities. And we appear regularly in the Taxpayers Alliance list as being one of the lowest councils in terms of the number of senior salaries we've got. So actually we've got far less top staff than similar councils. So we have absolutely tried to drive down those costs. But what I would say is, even if we could, and we can't because employment law is not that simple, but even if we could, and it was a sensible thing to do to get rid of all of our senior managers, it wouldn't save us enough money, because we'd have, they don't get paid enough for the scale of the challenge that we've got. We're spending over £120 million a year just on social care services. Our senior staff salaries are not remotely close to that. So, nice idea, but it's simplistic if you think just get rid of a few people at the top and suddenly you've saved a load of money. Dave Trow makes the point, we've made a lot of bad investments. The council has made actually very few investments in terms of acquiring assets. All of them were under the previous administration. So the Castlewood office building, the Sovereign Centre, the North World District Centre, and the Carlton Street car park, all of those were purchased under a previous administration. You voted them out in 2019, you kept them out in 2023. So that's why there haven't been any new bad investments since 2019 and this administration has been in. We're trying to mitigate the impacts of those negative investments as best we can. But as I said earlier, unfortunately, we're stuck clearing up the mess that someone else made. A number of people have talked about the struggle, the real struggle to pay council tax, and we absolutely understand that. We're all council taxpayers, we're all residents of North Somerset. If we can find a way of avoiding significant council tax rises, we will absolutely take it. We're working really hard to try and get the government to look again at our funding and to give us more resources and more support. We will absolutely continue, as colleagues have talked about, to try and find efficiencies and savings that we can make to reduce our costs. And if we can avoid, council tax rises are absolutely a last resort. What I would also say is that we do have a council tax support scheme so that low-income households can get support with their council tax bill if they're in real hardship. Nobody wants to be in that position, of course, but some help is available. And we do recognise that by increasing council tax, we are likely to see more people in that difficult situation. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so we don't have time to get through all of the other questions. But I know that my colleagues and I will try and jump on the Facebook page and answer and follow up on the ones that we can. We'll look to do another one of these sessions in the new year and take more questions. And I'll ask the team to put our email addresses in the chat, so that if you've got further questions or there were points that you wanted to raise that you didn't have the opportunity to, then you can follow up with us direct, and we will absolutely come back to you. I'm going to ask my colleagues if they've got any final thoughts before we wrap up, and any final messages that they would like to get across. I'm going to start with Annemieke.
Thank you. I have been scanning some of the comments, and I was struck by that comment that Mike responded to earlier about people saying, you should all resign. And somebody else asked, where can I find out how long people have been in the cabinet? Actually, I was only elected in 2023. When I told people that I was running to become a local councillor, I cannot tell you how many people said, why would you do that? There is no money in local councils. You're just going to have a really hard time. And actually, they're obviously completely right. And it is much, much more difficult than I had expected. But I'm completely with Mike. And I know that my colleagues will feel the same thing. We have to make some really difficult decisions. But we're all working extremely hard to do the very best we can for all our residents in North Somerset, and so there is no chance of me resigning. If anything, I'm going to work even harder as we go forward, because actually the next few years are going to be extremely difficult. And I don't think there's any way that any of us could deny that. So I just wanted to say that some of us haven't even been here all that long, and yet we've been thrown into, the situation where we are a member of the cabinet, and we work very hard. I really love what I do. And I really love the fact that I am actually helping to make a difference. And I hope that people will agree that what we are doing is actually making a positive difference to everyone in North Somerset. So that's my final thought, is thank you for listening.
Thanks, Annemieke. Roger?
Yes, I too was elected to the council and the cabinet in 2023. And yes, once you get inside a council and see how things work, you realise quite the problems that you are up against. It's not always apparent from outside the council. I stood to be a councillor, asked to be elected, and said that I would tell the truth, no matter how unpleasant that truth may be, and I would make good decisions, not some of the decisions that I think Mike has spoken about from previous administrations, and actively attempt to stop those type of decisions. So no, I'm not stepping down either, because I think I'm doing a good job, and I think I've got the right attitude to continue to do a good job. A couple of things I wanted to say from before was, there are high-paid staff in this council let's not forget that these people are professionals in their fields, that it's taken them very many years moving through and a lot of education to get to the stage they're at, and they're now reaping the rewards of all the hard work that they've put into those positions. There are many people in this country that earn substantial sums of money because they've done the work for it, and there's no difference with your council employees. And when I was scanning through the questions at the end, somebody said, is there anything that we can do as residents to help in this situation? And as always, the problems stem from the government. So please, please, please write to your MP, tell them to lobby their own government ministers to actually release the funds that we need, rather than cutting back the funds that we need.
Thanks, Roger. Catherine?
Gosh, it's all been said. Yeah, I've been doing this a little bit longer than Annemieke and Roger, but not as long as Mike. And I've been elected. I was elected first in 2011, then I wasn't elected again, then I got elected, and I've been a cabinet member since 2019. And it is, yes, it is really, really difficult, because we all do this because we want to make a difference, a positive difference. And I mean, I'm extremely committed to the role of improving life for children, especially in special educational needs, and I've been doing it for a while now. What impresses me, that I think people don't realise, is the dedication of the teams that I work with, and probably Roger as well, our social workers and everybody who works within children's services. They really care. They really care about children. They care about families. They want things to be better. It isn't always perfect. I know that. I've seen comments from a couple of people I know in the chat or in the comment section, and I'm aware that things don't always go smoothly, but that's not to say we don't want them to go smoothly. We want things to work properly, and that's what we spend, I think, every day of our life as a councillor doing, is trying to sort of improve things, because we are also residents and we are on the receiving end of these services just like everybody else. So, you know, we know what it's like. I came into this because I had personal experience of some issues around social care, and I thought, hang on, you know, instead of my sort of shouting from the sidelines, maybe I'll stand for election and see if I can make a difference. And I hope I've made some difference. But anyway, beyond that, I just want to say to everybody to have a very happy, peaceful and loving Christmas. And we can all look forward, I hope, to a better new year. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. And I'm just going to wrap us up by echoing my colleagues. I really appreciate you taking the time to join us in whatever format that you have tonight. We've tried to give you honest answers, and I certainly think we've tried to tell you things that you won't like and you won't want to hear. So you can't say we're sugarcoating it. And all I would say is that all councillors, and there are plenty of councillors who I disagree with all the time, some of whom I've struggled to think, have they made one good decision in their lives? But all of them have come into it for the right reasons. They're trying to improve their community, and being an elected member and working for a local authority as a staff member is a vocation, and we're trying to do the best things that we can. So all I would say is, please do give us a hard time. Please do challenge us, because that's what we're here to do. But please be respectful and do it in a way that recognises that people are trying their best. They're trying to get things done and trying to improve things, often in circumstances which are outside our direct control and influence. And the beauty of the system is there'll be elections in 2027. And if you don't like what you've had, you can pick someone new, can't you? So I'm going to wrap up there. Thank you very much. And I do wish you all a very Merry Christmas and Happy New Year. And I hope that for all of us, we can have some positive things to look forward to in 2026. Thank you very much.